Welcome to this Wood Solution Campus presentation on building regulations. It presents an overview of the scope and requirements of the National Construction Code, or NCC. All states use the NCC as their primary building regulation. It is a national code with minor state variation, and it applies to the design and construction of all buildings. The NCC is organised in 3 volumes, with the general building provisions included in the first 2. Volume 1 covers multi-residential and commercial building types. Volume 2 covers general house construction. Most of the discussion in this presentation focuses on provisions in Volume 1. However, Volume 2 contains very similar requirements. The NCC was known as the Building Code of Australia, or BCA, and it still includes the BCA documents in Volume 1 and 2. The NCC suite of documents can be downloaded for free from the Australian Building Code Board's website. The goal of the NCC is to efficiently apply nationally consistent minimum necessary standards for health, safety, including structural safety and safety from fire, amenity and sustainability. The NCC is a performance-based code. It sets the performance the building or building element is required to achieve, not how it is to be achieved. Compliance with the code's performance requirements can be achieved in 3 ways. First, a design can comply with the deemed to satisfy provisions. These are a set of rules of how things should be built included in the documents. Second, an alternative solution can be formulated. This can comply with the performance requirements listed in the NCC, or to be shown at least equivalent to the deemed to satisfy provisions. Lastly, compliance can be achieved by combining both these methods, following the deemed to satisfy provisions in some areas and developing a suitable alternative solution for others. Several major sections of the NCC Volume 1 contain provisions that significantly affect timber construction and will be discussed here briefly. These are Section A, Classification of Building, Section B, Structure, Section C, Fire Resistance, Section F, Health and Amenity, Section G, Ancillary Provisions, and Section H, Energy Efficiency. Section A of the NCC classifies buildings by their function, and the various building classes are shown in this table. Generally, Class 1 to 4 buildings are residential or accommodation buildings. Class 5 to 6 buildings are general commercial buildings. Shops and factories are Class 7 and 8 buildings, and public buildings such as hospitals and schools are Class 9 buildings. These classifications are important as many NCC provisions set specific requirements for buildings of particular classes. Section B deals with structural requirements. The NCC requires that a building or structure, to the degree necessary, must perform satisfactorily. This section then calls up a suite of standards used to determine structural integrity and set design processes, including AS 1720.1, Design of Timber Structures, and AS 1684, Residential Timber Frame Construction. These standards and standards referenced in them have the same legal force as the NCC. For example, the NCC references AS 1684, Residential Timber Frame Construction, and it references or calls up AS 4055, Wind Load for Houses, AS 4785, Timber Softwood, Sawn and Mill Products, and many other standards. These standards then have the same legal status as the NCC. Section C deals with fire resistance. Its objective is to protect people from fire, allow them to evacuate, and stop the fire from spreading to other properties. The code establishes levels of fire resistance for construction based on the building's class and its rise in stories. It then sets 3 construction types. Type A, which is the most resistant, Type B, and then Type C, which is the least resistant. The schedule for each construction type then lists the required fire resistance of elements in the building structure, its envelope, and particular internal areas. These are expressed as fire resistance levels, or FRLs. An FRL is the required resistance of an element to fire expressed in minutes for each of three categories: structural adequacy, integrity, and insulation. For example, a party wall between apartments in a 3-storey timber-framed building has a required FRL of 90-90-90. This means that the wall must be structurally adequate to fire for 90 minutes. It must maintain its integrity and stop gases and flames going through it for 90 minutes. And it must resist excess temperature rises going through the wall for 90 minutes. Section F deals with surface water, damp and waterproofing. These are all important to maintain healthy conditions in and around the building. This section establishes requirements for damp control, subfloor ventilation and similar factors such as flashings around windows. For example, there are limits on the space below timber floors and the provision for perimeter ventilators to allow for subfloor ventilation. This is to dry out moisture, reduce the chances of decay, and keep conditions inside and under the building healthy. Section G5 establishes requirements for the design of buildings in bushfire areas. Buildings constructed in a designated bushfire-prone area must be designed and constructed to reduce the risk of ignition from a bushfire while the front passes. Section J is the last section covered here. It establishes requirements for thermal performance. It deals with provision for building services, the building fabric, external glazing, building ceiling and other matters. These are all modified by climate. This map is included in the NCC and establishes the climate zones in force around the country. These zones are used to determine the NCC requirements for aspects such as insulation and the glazing for all classes of building. In summary, the NCC is a performance-based building code that sets out nationally consistent minimum necessary standards for safety through structural and fire provisions, health through ventilation and dampness control, amenity through the provision of facilities, and sustainability through control of energy usage and thermal performance. Wood Solutions guides cover many NCC areas, such as external envelope and decks designed to AS 3959, construction of buildings in bushfire-prone areas.